Everybody rolling? All right. All right. Thank you all for coming today, and I appreciate your interest in coming. I want to talk about a very significant operation that the Bibb County Sheriff's Office and the Federal Bureau of Investigation embarked on toward the latter part of last year. Really from September through December of last year, we embarked on this investigation that we call Operation Extended Stay. And you'll understand why we call it that here in just a minute. But it's an operation that took several months. It really started before that in some preliminary investigation, but this is some more of the details of it. And we start off with, it all started when we started getting calls around these hotels around I-475 and 8. We get a number of hotels, and in that area there's about 22 separate hotels in that area, and from January through August of last year, we received 137 calls for various activities, for drug activities, shots fired, suspicious persons, sex offenses, and we all know there's all types of nefarious activities, drug activities, human trafficking, all of that kind of stuff can happen in some of these hotels. And all of these calls during that time amounted to 137. So we decided it's probably time to do something about it. Andy Smith with the FBI and our team got together to work on a plan, and they launched an investigation. And it all started with one person, but it sort of trickled down to include these hotels right here, these several hotels right around the 475 and 80 area. So those that are highlighted there were specifically involved in this investigation. There was some activity there, or some of the people that were targeted, and some of the people that were arrested had some connection to those particular hotels there. So it all started with this individual right here. We call him a high-level street seller, Mr. Carlos Chaz Brown. And he was the initial target of the investigation. They went in and started investigating him, and as these things started happening, it started spreading out. Mr. Brown, of course, now he's being charged with conspiracy to traffic methamphetamine, trafficking heroin, and trafficking methamphetamine, and he is also a documented gang member. The next one, his initial investigation led to these two individuals, Mr. Roderick Chester and Courtney Pitts. You could look at them as sort of like the mid-level, the next level of sellers or providers in this organization of criminal activity. And an interesting note about Mr. Chester, he has also been charged with murder in connection with the homicide of Ms. Morgan Smith, who was discovered by her two small children dead back in August of last year on Walmart Drive. So it just shows sometimes with this drug activity, there's other nefarious actions all the way up to and including murder in this case. Allegedly, he's been charged but not convicted as yet. But the next slide, and this individual, Mr. Robert Lee Wisby, you would consider him as sort of like the wholesaler. He was the connection to Atlanta and to other sources to bring these drugs into Macon to give to the other two individuals, and then move on to all of the rest of these individuals, the other almost 20 individuals who I guess you could say they were like your retail establishments. These were the people that were selling it on the street, selling it wherever they needed to sell, and doing those kinds of things. So in the amount of drugs that we found, and one of the things that we have found out in this, but before that we took $325,800 worth of street value drugs. As you can see over here on the table is like a representative of that of those drugs, and the weight. We always talk about grams, pounds. And I said let's put it like in pounds if we can, because everybody knows about pounds. But methamphetamine 5 pounds, marijuana 10 pounds, heroin 36 grams, crack cocaine 36 grams. And you can see the street value of that, and the Meth is because of its volume, is the most highest dollar value. But when you look at value per hit, I guess you could say the heroin is probably the most valuable. But just as an example, that 5 pounds of meth, if it affected one person per hit, that's over 8,600 particular individuals that could have been affected by that, just by the methamphetamine. One of the things that we did learn in this operation, when we look at the hotels, is that these individuals, the drug business, the drug selling business has evolved. We're seeing it more and more in the hotel setting, to where that they are setting up shop. We don't see it, while we do see it sometimes in residential areas and housing areas, we don't see it as much because fortunately the neighbors don't stand for it. We always get calls, it looks like it's a drug house down the street, they're doing this. So the drug sellers are moving into some place that they hope that they're not going to be seen and hope that they won't be as easily detected, and that's going into the hotels and motels around. But we chase them even there, and that's part of this operation here. Another thing that we find is that they're becoming more mobile. If you order some drugs, they'll deliver. You know, we talk about Grubhub and Waiter. Well, you go from Grubhub to Drug Hub. These individuals are, they'll deliver it. They'll meet you in the parking lot. They'll come to your house if you want them to come. If you want a drug dealer to come to your house and deliver drugs, that's on you. But they'll meet you somewhere, but you arrange to buy. And a lot of these buys were arranged that way. And so that's how the drug selling business is sort of evolving, and then we do all we can to stay up on that. The next one. Now to show you the effect that this had, when this operation took place and we were showing such a concentration of people in the area, the calls dropped down significantly. So from September to December, we only had 28 various calls for some of the same things that we had 137 calls for earlier in the year. So these types of enforcement actions do have an effect on a particular area. And so finally, real quick, this cannot be done alone. The Bibb County Sheriff's Office and we cannot do it by ourselves. All of these agencies, the FBI, Drug Enforcement, Perry PD, Athens Clark, GBI, Blakely County, Butts County, a lot of them came in and helped us back in December. There was a large roundup. There was a raid that was having a lot of search warrants that took place. So all these agencies came in and gave us a hand to do that and help us. But on the ground, you can't do it without competent people. You can't do it without the folks. These gentlemen over here are the ones that where the rubber meets the road. We have our drug unit, SWAT unit, our SRT unit that were all involved in this from the get-go. They would have target individuals that needed stopping, that needed investigating. So as the investigators were doing their job, making their calls, they would contact the SRT team. They would go out and make the stops. They would go out and do a little further investigation in the field to where that we can make some successful cases. And so the lead agent on this is Jesse Thompson. He's done an outstanding job with that. And so they've done a great job. Andy Smith with the FBI has been with us the whole time. And I've got to say this about the FBI, the DEA, but the FBI in particular. They have worked with us like they're like a hand in glove. They have been phenomenal in their partnership with our agency and their commitment to bring these bad folks to justice. And so we couldn't do it without them, with their expertise, with their commitment. We couldn't do it without them. Now, we call this Operation Extended Stay, and we have a couple people here that they may have been in the hotels, the extended stay hotels, but we want to hopefully get these individuals into an extended stay correctional facility at some time in the future. So we have representing the U.S. Attorney's Office, Peter Leary, if you want to come up and say a couple of words, Peter.
Afternoon, folks. My name is Peter Leary. I'm the First Assistant U.S. Attorney at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And the main thing I'm here to do today is to point out that this is the kind of impact that an operation like this can have when you have federal, state, and local officers really working seamlessly together. You can have a real impact, as you've heard the sheriff explain this afternoon. And mainly also to say thank you to the men and women in law enforcement who do this work every day and who did this work particularly well in this investigation, and again, a real flawless federal, state, and local partnership. So we look forward to continuing that work and continuing to help on our end at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and thank you very much.
And to show that we have committed partners both on the federal side and on the local side, Macon District Attorney David Cook is here to talk about the local prosecution piece of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. I just want to commend everyone who played a part in this, particularly your office, Sheriff, and the FBI and all the local partners. You know, anytime you have an operation that runs this smoothly, it's very evident that many people played a part to make it happen. And I just want to say on the other side, anytime you have crimes this vast and far-reaching, there are many people who played a part. And my office, and I know the U.S. Attorney's Office, are going to do everything we can to make sure that any person who played a part in these crimes will be held accountable. Thank you.
And out of all of these individuals, we have one person that is still outstanding, a female named Lori Harrell, but there are active warrants out on her. We'll probably have her before too long. But this has been a great operation, and some of these folks were arrested throughout the time of the operation, and most of them are still in jail because they have some serious charges, and they've not been able to make bonds, so they've not been able to get back out on the street to conduct their activities. So in that regard, this area around these hotels and our whole entire community has been made safer by the work of all of these fine officers and the partnerships that we have. So with that, is any questions or anything anybody has?
The woman who is still on the loose, do we know or have a feeling she's still in the area, or?
She's around. We don't. She's around. We sort of know in general areas, but obviously she's not somewhere we can get our hands on her. That might be a great one for a Crime Stopper tip, and so that is a great opportunity for somebody to make that call and get some cash reward through Crime Stoppers. But we're sort of tracking where she might be, and so we'll probably have her very soon. We had one that was we looked for that was in Florida that was just arrested earlier this week. So they will be eventually caught.
Now, how about the hotels? Have the local hotels been complying with you all in getting these people out of our area, getting the drugs off the streets?
Well, it's one of those kind of things that you get some talk of helping us, but then they're like, I don't know what they're doing. They rent a room. They rent these extended stay rooms, so we don't really know what's going on in there. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. We're looking into that, but when we have asked for some cooperation from some of the hotel management, hotel owners, they have been helpful as much as they can. But then they kind of plead ignorance sometimes as to some of the activities that's going on. But that's another phase of investigation and some things that we're looking into to hopefully maybe hold some of these hotel owners and managers accountable for what happens on their premises. So now that we have really documented serious offenses happening in some of these areas, it kind of gives us a little more leeway that we can bring them into a little more compliance maybe.
Do we know who were originally making the calls to the sheriff's office? I mean, was it management or was it guests that were staying at these motels and hotels?
It was some of both. We get some from management whenever there's some of the things that may be happening on their premises that they would call us, maybe loud noise or disturbances and that sort of thing. Sometimes it was people staying there. Sometimes it was people passing through. Sometimes it would be an incident that happened, maybe a theft, maybe an assault or something like that we would get a call that would bring us to the hotel, and you start seeing clues of nefarious actions going on, and then you start seeing people that are local staying in an extended stay hotel for periods of time, so you gotta wonder what they're up to and that sort of thing.
Can you talk about what further work went into it? I mean, I think you touched on like controlled buys, or there were like other type of surveillance. How did you guys?
Well, that's all part of the investigation. That's all some of the tricks of the trade. And as we go into this, a lot of resources were brought to bear in this case. A lot of different investigative techniques, a lot of different just informants, people calling, hey, this is where the person's at. Hey, this is what's going on over here. Undercover deputies out there keeping eyes on the patrol deputies whenever something's suspicious, or there's somebody that whenever one of these drug hub transactions take place, there's people watching for that. You call the patrol deputy to say, hey, there's something going on here, check it out. And then you get somebody arrested with drugs, money, and guns. And so that's how it goes. But there's a lot of different resources that went into it, and as the cases progress, and we can talk more about that, but that's it.
Now, this drug came from Atlanta or from where? The drugs, you said, how they get it?
Most of these drugs come from Atlanta, right? And you have to think about legitimate business. Atlanta is seen as a hub, a distribution hub for legitimate business all throughout the Southeast. Well, the drug dealers, the drug people, use those same networks of roads, air travel, and all of that to move their product, and then it gets to Atlanta, then it gets moved out. Macon, because it's not far from Atlanta, we are close to major interstates, roads, we become a mini distribution area here. So you can see it goes from wherever it comes from, even out of country, or some of it's made here in the United States. It winds up in Atlanta as a distribution point, comes to Macon to a distribution point. But most of this was sort of earmarked and destined for consumption and use here in Macon. And some of it was, the pipeline was stopped before it moved on to somewhere else, but a lot of this was earmarked basically for consumption and use here in Macon. So we significantly put a dent in some of that here locally.
Now, looking at this board of mugshots here, I see that some of the members, or some of the people on here, it says gang member on there.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of talk about their involvement with everything?
Well, yes. Many of them are members of different gangs, mafia, Crips, all this, that, and the other. It just shows that this was not one gang operation. You had members of various different gangs that were in sort of the retail drug sale business. And so it shows that even though they may be members of different gangs, which may or may not even like each other, when it comes down to the street level, and they're all in it to sell product. They're all in it in the retail business. But as far as any type of gang, you could call this whole operation a gang of drug sellers. But really, you have one, as I say, Mr. Wisby was the sort of the wholesaler to the other two gentlemen. To the others, it was more of a sales and distribution operation than it was as typically, as you would say, a gang or Crips or a Blood or a Mafia gang, because you had members of various different gangs involved in this.
How are these drugs affecting families here in Central Georgia?
Well, look at heroin overdoses, look at methamphetamine addiction, even the marijuana, the crack cocaine, and we hadn't seen much crack for a while, but we found a little bit of that here, and heroin. And so any family that has been affected by somebody that is addicted to any one of these drugs is devastating. It has a profound effect on a person's livelihood, on their family, and everything. So that's what we're trying to stem here. It's one thing to get these folks off for selling it, but the slide I showed where potentially over 8,000 people could have been affected by just the methamphetamine. That's a profound impact when you get that much off the street.
Is there anything else on the table that we missed? You talked about meth, you talked about crack cocaine.
Meth, crack cocaine, that's anything else, heroin. Got some heroin in there, and so and you can look at it and you can almost the methamphetamine is very dangerous, but the heroin is really dangerous, and it's in a small package. But that's a lot of danger can come in those very small packages of the heroin, and it doesn't take much of that to create a hit or create a dose that can really kill you.
Do you know what the estimated value of all these drugs are?
Yeah, it was $325,000.